Picture a Roman battlefield, dust clouds rising, thousands of men locked in combat, the clash of metal on metal, the screams of the wounded, and cutting through all of it, a piercing blast from a bronze trumpet that instantly transforms chaos into coordinated movement as an entire legion shifts formation in response to a sound they've trained to obey without thinking. So, sit back, grab a cup of tea, and get ready to explore how the Roman army communicated across chaotic battlefields using specialized horns and trumpets, discover why sound signals were essential when dust, smoke, and confusion made visual signals useless. Understand how different instruments, the tuba, cornu, buccina, and lituus, each had different purposes and different sounds, and learn what the Roman signal system reveals about why this army dominated the ancient world for centuries through discipline, organization, and the remarkable ability to coordinate thousands of men through nothing more than the call of a horn. When we think about what made the Roman army so effective, we usually focus on their weapons, their armor, their famous formations like the testudo or tortoise. We think about their engineering, the roads, the camps, the siege works. We think about their discipline and their training. All of these were important, but there's one aspect of Roman military effectiveness that rarely gets the attention it deserves: their system of acoustic signaling. The Romans didn't just have horns and trumpets. They had a sophisticated communication system that allowed commanders to control their forces across distances and through conditions that would have made any visual signal useless. Consider the problem facing any ancient commander. You have thousands of men spread across a battlefield that might be a mile or more wide. Dust kicked up by thousands of feet obscures vision. Smoke from fires, whether signal fires, burning villages, or the aftermath of combat, hangs in the air. The terrain itself might block line of sight. Your men are engaged in desperate hand-to-hand combat, their attention focused on the enemy directly in front of them. How do you tell them to advance, to retreat, to shift their formation, to pursue a fleeing enemy, or to disengage and regroup? Visual signals had obvious limitations. Standards and flags could be raised and lowered, but they required line of sight. A soldier fighting for his life couldn't constantly watch for flag signals. Messengers could be sent, but they took time, could be killed or captured, and might not reach all units simultaneously. The Romans needed something that could reach every soldier instantly, something that could cut through the noise and chaos, something that demanded attention and required immediate response. They needed sound. The Roman military signal system used 4 main instruments, each with its own purpose and its own distinctive sound. Understanding these instruments helps us understand how the Roman army actually functioned in the field. The tuba was the primary infantry signal instrument. This was a straight bronze trumpet, approximately 4 feet long, with a conical bore that widened gradually from the mouthpiece to the bell. The tuba produced a clear, penetrating tone that could carry across a battlefield. Its straight design was simple and practical, no complex curves to affect the sound or make the instrument difficult to manufacture. The soldiers who played the tuba were called tubacines, and they were specialized troops trained specifically for this role. The tuba was used for the most important battlefield signals: advance, attack, retreat, halt. When a tubacen raised his instrument and blew the signal for advance, every soldier within earshot knew what to do. The sound cut through the noise of battle, reaching men who couldn't see their commanders, who couldn't see the standards, who could see nothing but the enemy in front of them. The tuba was the voice of command made audible across the chaos. The cornu was a larger and more complex instrument. This was a curved horn that wrapped around the player's body, supported by a wooden crossbar that rested on the player's shoulder. The curve allowed for a much longer tube, and therefore a deeper, more resonant tone, while keeping the instrument manageable for a soldier who might need to move quickly. The players of the cornu were called cornicines, and they typically signalled for cavalry movements and for major army-wide commands. The cornu's deeper tone distinguished it from the higher-pitched tuba, allowing soldiers to recognize which instrument was sounding, even in the midst of battle. When the cornu sounded, it often meant a major tactical decision was being communicated, a general advance or retreat, a signal that affected the entire army rather than just individual units. The combination of tuba and cornu allowed for a kind of acoustic layering, with different instruments communicating different levels of command. The bucina had a different role entirely. This instrument, originally a shepherd's horn adapted for military use, was used primarily for camp routine rather than battlefield signals. The bucinatores, the soldiers who played the bucina, sounded it for watch changes, for the beginning and end of work details, for meal times, and for other regular camp activities. The bucina regulated the daily life of the Roman army, marking the hours and maintaining the discipline that made the legions so effective. While the bucina was less prominent in battle, its role in maintaining routine was crucial. An army that keeps regular hours, that changes its guards on schedule, that maintains its discipline even when not actively fighting, that army is ready when battle comes. The bucina was the metronome of Roman military life, keeping thousands of men synchronized in their daily activities. The lituus was the most distinctive-looking of the Roman military horns. This was a J-shaped instrument with an upturned bell, specifically associated with cavalry. The lituus produced a sound different from both the tuba and the cornu, allowing cavalry units to receive signals meant specifically for them without confusion with infantry commands. In the complex environment of a Roman battlefield, where infantry and cavalry operated together but required different orders, this acoustic distinction was essential. The soldiers who played these instruments were not ordinary troops who happened to have musical ability. They were specialists, trained specifically in their instruments and in the signals they would need to communicate. The tubicines, cornicines, and bucinatores formed a distinct group within the legion, with their own training, their own equipment, and their own crucial role in battle. These signallers were positioned near the commanders, ready to translate orders into sound instantly. When a legate or tribune decided to order an advance, he didn't shout the order himself. His voice couldn't carry far enough. Instead, he gave the order to his signaller, who raised his instrument and blew the appropriate call. The sound carried across the battlefield, reaching every soldier who had been trained to recognize and respond to it. The positioning of signallers was itself a tactical consideration. They needed to be close enough to the commander to receive orders quickly, but they also needed to be in positions where their signals would carry effectively. In some cases, multiple signallers might be positioned at different points to ensure that signals reached all parts of the army. The signallers also marched with the standards, the eagles and other emblems that marked unit positions, creating a combined visual and acoustic command system. What signals did these instruments communicate? Our ancient sources give us some information, though the exact details of Roman military signals have not survived completely. We know there were signals for advance, halt, retreat, attack, and pursue. There were signals for changing formation, shifting from marching column to battle line, for example, or forming the famous testudo. There were signals to engage the enemy and signals to disengage and reform. Vegetius, writing in the late 4th or early 5th century CE, provides our most detailed ancient account of Roman military signals. He describes 3 main categories: signals to advance and engage, signals to halt and stand firm, and signals to retreat and disengage. Within these categories, there were likely numerous specific calls for specific situations, though the exact repertoire varied over time and perhaps between different units. The signals were standardized across the Roman army. This was crucial for an army that drew soldiers from across the Mediterranean world, that transferred units from one frontier to another, that needed troops from different legions to work together seamlessly. A soldier trained in Syria needed to recognize the same signals as a soldier trained in Britain. The standardization of signals was part of the broader standardization that made the Roman army so effective. Standard equipment, standard training, standard tactics, and standard communication. Training soldiers to recognize and respond to horn signals was a fundamental part of Roman military education. New recruits learned the signals as part of their basic training, drilling repeatedly until response became automatic. This wasn't a matter of understanding the signal and then deciding what to do. It was a matter of hearing the signal and responding instantly, without conscious thought. In the chaos of battle, there was no time for deliberation. The signal had to trigger immediate action. This training was tested in exercises. Roman armies regularly conducted drills and mock battles, and these exercises included practice with signals. soldiers learned to respond to signals while tired, while distracted, while under simulated pressure. The goal was to make the response so automatic that it would work even in the extreme stress of actual combat. Why was sound so much more effective than visual signals on an ancient battlefield? Several factors contributed. First, sound is omnidirectional. It spreads in all directions from its source, reaching listeners regardless of which way they're facing. A soldier engaged in combat, focused on the enemy in front of him, might never see a flag being waved behind him, but he would hear a trumpet blast. Second, sound penetrates obstacles that block vision. Dust clouds, smoke, terrain features, even the mass of other soldiers, all of these could prevent a soldier from seeing a visual signal. Sound waves travel around and over obstacles, reaching ears that eyes cannot reach. On a dusty, smoky, crowded battlefield, sound was simply more reliable than sight. Third, sound demands attention in a way that visual signals do not. A loud trumpet blast is impossible to ignore. It cuts through whatever else is happening, forcing the listener to register it. Visual signals, by contrast, require the viewer to be looking in the right direction at the right time. In the chaos of battle, that couldn't be guaranteed. Fourth, sound signals could be repeated and sustained. A trumpeter could blow his signal multiple times, ensuring that it was heard. He could hold a note, giving soldiers time to register and respond. Visual signals were more fleeting. A flag raised and lowered might be missed by anyone who wasn't watching at that exact moment. The psychological impact of Roman military horns should not be underestimated. For Rome's enemies, the sound of Roman trumpets was terrifying. The coordinated blasts announced not just Roman presence, but Roman organization. An army that could communicate across a battlefield through sound was an army that could coordinate its movements, that could respond to changing situations, that could bring its full force to bear at the decisive point. The horns told the enemy that they faced not a mob, but a machine. Ancient sources record the terror that Roman signals inspired. Celtic and Germanic warriors, accustomed to the individual heroics of their own military traditions, found the disciplined coordination of Roman forces deeply unsettling. The horns were part of that coordination, visible, or rather audible proof that the Romans fought as a single organism rather than as individuals. The psychological warfare began before the first sword was drawn. For Roman soldiers, the horns provided reassurance as well as command. In the confusion of battle, when a soldier might feel isolated and uncertain, the sound of the familiar signals told him that his commanders were still in control, that the army was still functioning as a unit, that he was part of something larger than himself. The horns were a lifeline connecting the individual soldier to the command structure that gave his actions meaning. The archaeological evidence for Roman military horns is substantial, though fragmentary. Several tubae and cornua have survived either complete or in pieces, allowing us to understand their construction and, through modern reconstructions, their sound. These surviving instruments confirm the descriptions in ancient texts and show the high quality of Roman military equipment. Depictions of military musicians appear on Roman monuments, most famously on Trajan's Column in Rome. This remarkable monument, erected in the early 2nd century CE to commemorate Trajan's Dacian wars, includes detailed relief sculptures showing Roman military life. Among the many scenes are depictions of tuba scenes and corner scenes, their instruments clearly visible, positioned among the troops. These images show us how the signallers were integrated into military formations. Modern scholars have reconstructed Roman military instruments and tested their acoustic properties. These experiments have confirmed that the tuba and cornu could produce sounds loud enough to carry across a battlefield, with distinctive tones that would be recognizable even in noisy conditions. The experiments have also explored what signals might have sounded like, though we can never know for certain the exact calls used by Roman armies. How did the Roman signal system compare to those of other ancient armies? The Greeks used trumpets as well, and the salpinx, a straight trumpet similar to the tuba, was a standard part of Greek military equipment. But Greek armies were generally smaller and fought in more concentrated formations than Roman armies, reducing the need for sophisticated long-range communication. The phalanx, the standard Greek formation, was a dense mass of men who could largely be controlled by voice commands from officers within the formation. Celtic and Germanic armies relied more on individual initiative and less on coordinated maneuver. Their warriors fought as individuals or in small groups, following their chieftains rather than responding to centralized commands. They had horns and trumpets. The carnix, a tall Celtic war horn with an animal-shaped bell, is famous from ancient descriptions and archaeological finds, but these were used more for intimidation and encouragement than for tactical communication. The Roman system was distinguished by its sophistication and standardization, the use of multiple instruments with different sounds for different purposes, the training of specialized signalers, the drilling of troops to respond automatically, the integration of acoustic signals with visual signals and messenger systems. All of this represented a level of military organization that few ancient armies could match. This signal system enabled the tactical flexibility for which Roman armies were famous. Unlike the Greek phalanx, which was effective but relatively inflexible, Roman formations could adapt to changing circumstances. They could shift from one formation to another, concentrate force at a weak point, extend their line to prevent flanking, or contract to strengthen a threatened sector. All of these maneuvers required communication, and the signal system made that communication possible. Consider the famous Roman ability to retreat in good order. For most ancient armies, retreat meant rout. Once soldiers began falling back, discipline collapsed and the army disintegrated. Roman armies, by contrast, could conduct organized withdrawals, with units falling back in sequence while others covered their retreat. This required precise coordination, which required communication, which required the signal system. The difference between orderly retreat and panicked rout was often the difference between an army that survived to fight another day and one that was destroyed. The signal system also enabled the Romans to coordinate multiple units in complex operations. A Roman army might include several legions, auxiliary units, cavalry, and specialized troops, all of which needed to work together. The signal system allowed commanders to synchronize the actions of these diverse forces, bringing them together at the right time and place. This coordination multiplied the effectiveness of Roman forces beyond what their numbers alone would suggest. The evolution of the Roman signal system over time is difficult to trace precisely, but we can make some general observations. The basic instruments, tuba, cornu, bucina, appear to have been in use from at least the Middle Republic, and probably earlier. The system was refined over centuries of warfare, with signals and procedures standardized as the Roman army became more professional. The late Republic and early Empire, when the Roman army reached its highest level of professionalism, was probably when the signal system was most fully developed. The permanent legions of this period, with their career soldiers and standardized training, provided the ideal environment for a sophisticated communication system. Soldiers served for 20 years or more, giving them ample time to master the signals and responses. In late antiquity, as the Roman army changed in composition and organization, the signal system may have evolved as well. The sources from this period, including Vegetius, suggest that the basic system remained in place, but the details may have varied. The increasing use of cavalry and the changing nature of Roman warfare would have required adaptations to the traditional signal system. The legacy of Roman military signals extended beyond the Roman period. Medieval armies used trumpets and horns for signaling, drawing on traditions that ultimately traced back to Rome. The basic principle, using distinctive sounds to communicate commands across distances, remained valid throughout the age of pre-modern warfare. Only with the development of electronic communication in the modern era did acoustic signaling become obsolete on the battlefield. Even today, military organizations use bugles and trumpets for ceremonial purposes, maintaining a connection to the ancient tradition of military music. The bugle calls that mark military life, reveille, taps, mess call, are descendants of the signals that Roman buccinatores sounded in their camps 2,000 years ago. The form has changed, but the function, using sound to regulate military life, remains the same. What does the Roman signal system teach us about the Romans themselves? First, it shows their genius for organization. The Romans didn't just have good soldiers, they had systems that multiplied the effectiveness of those soldiers. The signal system was one such system, allowing coordination that would otherwise have been impossible. Second, it shows the importance of training and discipline in Roman military success. The signals were useless unless soldiers responded to them instantly and correctly. This required extensive training, constant drilling, and the kind of discipline that the Romans were famous for. The signal system was both a product of Roman discipline and a tool for maintaining it. Third, it shows Roman practicality. The Romans faced a real problem, how to communicate across a chaotic battlefield, and they developed a practical solution. They didn't rely on individual heroism or divine intervention. They developed tools and techniques that worked, and they trained their soldiers to use them effectively. Fourth, it shows the integration of different elements in Roman military practice. The signal system didn't exist in isolation. It was part of a larger system that included visual signals, messenger systems, standard formations, and trained responses. The Romans understood that military effectiveness came from the integration of many elements, not from any single factor. The sound of Roman trumpets echoed across battlefields from Britain to Mesopotamia, from the Rhine to the Sahara. For centuries, that sound meant Roman power, Roman discipline, Roman victory. Enemies learned to fear it. Allies learned to rely on it. Roman soldiers learned to obey it without thought, knowing that their lives and the success of their army depended on instant response to the call of the horn. Today, no Roman trumpets sound on battlefields. The instruments survive only in museums and reconstructions. The signals have been forgotten, the calls lost to time. But the principle that the Romans understood, that communication is essential to coordination, that coordination is essential to military effectiveness, that sound can reach where sight cannot, that principle remains as valid as ever. The Roman signal system was one of the keys to Roman military dominance, and understanding it helps us understand how Rome built and maintained the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen. The next time you see a depiction of a Roman army, in a movie, in a painting, in your imagination, listen for the horns. They're there, even if you can't hear them. The tubicines and cornicines standing near their commanders, instruments raised, ready to translate orders into sound. The soldiers trained to respond, waiting for the signal that will tell them what to do. The enemy, hearing the coordinated blasts, knowing that they face not a mob, but a machine. The Roman signal system was invisible in the sense that sound leaves no trace, but it was essential to everything the Roman army accomplished. In the call of the horn, we hear the voice of Roman military power.